Ever been told to give up something that's rightfully yours, just because someone louder, older, and whiter demanded it? That's exactly what happened to Malik and Layla Anderson, two black teen siblings flying alone for the first time in their lives. Malik, 16, and Layla, 14, were headed from Atlanta to Seattle on a special first-class trip arranged by their father, Derrick Anderson, a self-made billionaire and the CEO of Anderson Equity Group. The seats, 2A and 2B, had been personally reserved weeks in advance as a gift to mark their independence and growth. Derrick believed his children would gain more than travel experience on this journey. They'd learn dignity, confidence, and how to hold their ground in a world that doesn't always play fair. But minutes after boarding, what was meant to be a peaceful flight turned into a high-altitude confrontation that no one saw coming. One that would test not just the airline's policies, but the entire cabin's sense of justice. Malik and Layla Anderson sat side by side in seats 2A and 2B, nestled into the buttery leather of the Stratosphere Airlines first-class cabin, their eyes wide with anticipation. The two siblings, 16 and 14, were finally on their own. No chaperones, no staff, no parents. It was their first solo flight, a symbolic milestone gifted by their father, Derrick Anderson, a legendary name in American finance and the founder of Anderson Equity Group. Their destination, Seattle, where they had been invited to speak at a national youth entrepreneurship conference. It was more than just a trip. It was a test of their independence, confidence, and poise, everything their father had spent years instilling in them. Malik, dressed in a clean navy pullover and tailored black joggers, leaned back with a smile that mixed pride and nervous excitement. Layla, calm but wide-eyed, clutched a small leather-bound notebook where she'd been jotting down talking points for their panel. The cabin lighting cast a soft glow over their polished sneakers and subtle gold accessories, small reminders of the luxury they'd grown up around but never flaunted. A well-dressed flight attendant approached, her name badge glinting under the cabin lights. She smiled warmly, addressing them with respectful precision. "Mr. Malik Anderson, Miss Layla Anderson, may I offer you something to drink before takeoff?" Malik glanced at his sister with a grin. "Let's go with orange juice," he replied with a confidence that felt new but earned. Layla chuckled softly as the attendant walked away, her nerves settling. "I think we're really doing this," she whispered. "I think Dad would be proud." Malik nodded, gazing out the window at the hazy Atlanta skyline fading into twilight. "It's our chance to prove he was right to trust us." At first glance, everything was perfect. The gentle hum of pre-flight preparations, the calm voices of attendants checking bags and distributing warm towels, and the comforting familiarity of being called by name. All of it reinforced the sense that they truly belonged. But just as Layla reached for her juice and Malik pulled out his tablet to review their itinerary, a subtle chill crept into the air. It wasn't the temperature, it was a look. One of the younger flight attendants, no more than 25, walked by slowly, her steps faltering ever so slightly as she passed their row. Her eyes flicked down to her tablet, then to Malik and Layla, then back to her device. She didn't speak, but the hesitation in her movement said more than words ever could. She moved on quickly, but the damage was done. Malik felt it first, a twinge of discomfort, the silent kind that lingers when someone doubts you without ever saying why. Layla noticed it too, her expression tightening for just a second. It wasn't enough to cause a scene, but it planted a seed. They were dressed casually but neatly, carried themselves with poise, and clearly belonged in their seats. And yet, to that attendant, they were an anomaly. Two black teenagers, alone, sitting in first class. It didn't fit the picture she had in her head. The moment passed, but the unease lingered beneath the surface. Neither sibling said anything, but both understood the unspoken reality. It was a reminder that no matter how carefully you followed the rules, how qualified you were, how legitimately you arrived, some people would still need convincing. And that, they knew, was just the beginning of what this flight had in store. Just as the cabin doors sealed shut and the plane prepared for taxi, a sharp voice sliced through the soft murmurs of first class. A tall, meticulously groomed white woman in her early 50s, Janice Whitmore, strode down the aisle like she owned the sky. Dressed in a tailored beige pantsuit with oversized sunglasses still perched on her nose, Janice exuded the confidence of someone who was used to getting her way. She was a Platinum Elite member with Stratosphere Airlines, known not just for her frequent flyer status, but for her temper, her demands, and the curious fact that no crew ever seemed to say no to her. Her eyes landed on Malik and Layla like a laser. "Excuse me," she snapped, standing directly in front of them. "There's clearly been a mistake. These are my seats. I've sat in 2A and 2B for 6 years straight. Every Thursday flight, same route, same seats." Malik looked up, blinking. "I think there's been some confusion, ma'am. These were booked for us." "Don't ma'am me," she cut him off. "Children like you don't just pop up in first class unless someone dropped the ball. These seats are mine." A nearby flight attendant, startled by the raised voice, rushed over to intervene. "Ms. Whitmore, please, let me check the manifest." "I don't need you to check anything," Janice barked, not even looking at her. "Just do your job and move them." Tension rippled across the cabin like a dropped tray of glasses. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Cheryl with a calm voice and decades of experience, stepped forward to smooth things over. "Ms. Whitmore, I assure you we'll look into it. But according to our system, those seats are indeed reserved for Malik and Layla Anderson." Janice's eyes narrowed. "Anderson? Never heard of them. They're just kids. Look at them. Someone must have bumped me by mistake to accommodate some rich man's kids with a black card and no manners." Her voice was rising, and her insults were no longer subtle. "I've spent more on this airline than their entire education. I won't sit in 3A like some peasant because of a clerical error." The cabin fell silent. Passengers who had been scrolling through phones or sipping sparkling water suddenly froze, their eyes flickering toward the unfolding scene. Malik stayed seated, hands folded tightly, doing his best not to react. Layla's jaw clenched as Janice gestured dramatically toward their seats, demanding the crew remove them. "This is the problem with flying these days," Janice declared to no one and everyone. "Any kid with Wi-Fi and a last name thinks they belong here." Cheryl hesitated, clearly torn between upholding the seating assignment and appeasing the elite customer standing inches from her face. "Ms. Whitmore, please lower your voice." "We'll review this calmly." "Lower my voice?" Janice spat, incredulous. "I'm being robbed in broad daylight and you want me to whisper?" At that exact moment, near the second row on the opposite aisle, a man in his 30s adjusted his phone slightly in his lap. He wasn't texting, he was live streaming. No one knew yet, not Malik, not Layla, not Janice. But his phone was pointed right at the chaos, and his stream had already caught the moment Janice declared, "Kids like you don't belong here." Within seconds, viewers began joining. 10, then 100, then thousands. Someone in the comments typed, "Who is this woman?" Another wrote, "They better not move those kids." The internet had entered the cabin, quietly, invisibly, but with eyes wide open. And it was watching everything. Malik didn't yell. Layla didn't cry. Instead, as the tension in the cabin thickened like humid air before a storm, Malik quietly pulled out his phone, unlocked it with a calm swipe, and pressed one number, speed dial 1. His father. The line rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered, steady and strong. "Malik? You boarding?" Malik's voice didn't waver, but there was a sharpness beneath the calm. "Dad, there's a situation. A woman is demanding our seats. The crew's leaning her way. They know we're right, but they're still trying to make us move." On the other end of the line, Derrick Anderson, a man known for steering billion-dollar deals with a single nod, stood still. He was in the middle of a high-stakes investment meeting on the 43rd floor of the Anderson Equity headquarters in Manhattan, seated across from executives from a leading Japanese bank, finalizing a multi-billion-dollar global fintech merger. Around him, assistants scribbled notes, screens glowed with financial models, and translators whispered in corners. But the moment he heard his son's voice shift, measured but edged with injustice, Derrick Anderson stood up from the table without a word. One of the Japanese bankers looked up, puzzled. "Mr. Anderson?" Derrick simply buttoned his suit jacket and said, "Family matter. More important than capital." He walked out of the glass-walled boardroom without hesitation. Once inside his private office, he closed the door, walked over to the desk, and hit a line on the phone labeled Direct. It connected him to the CEO of Stratosphere Airlines, Preston Holloway, a longtime acquaintance and partner in private aviation logistics. Preston answered with a polished voice. "Derrick, didn't expect to hear from you today. What's going on?" Derrick didn't waste time. "My son Malik and daughter Layla are on board Flight 782 to Seattle. First class, seats 2A and 2B, booked under my name, paid in full, confirmed twice. They've just been publicly challenged for their seats by a platinum member. The flight crew is not protecting them. They're considering moving my children, even though they did nothing wrong." Preston, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about a seat. It's about the message you're sending. If this airline allows my children to be removed from their rightful place because they're young, because they're black, or because someone louder demands it, then our relationship is over. I'll reallocate every corporate travel contract we've signed with Stratosphere. And that's not a threat. That's a promise. On the other end of the line, Preston didn't respond immediately. He knew Derrick's tone. This wasn't a corporate bluff. This was a man defending his children, and he didn't just have the will to act, he had the power. After a tense pause, Preston exhaled. "Understood. I'll have my executive team on that aircraft within the hour. No one touches those kids. Consider it handled." Derrick didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The call ended. Back on the plane, Malik slid the phone back into his hoodie pocket, his face unreadable but steady. Layla leaned closer. "Is he handling it?" Malik nodded once. "Yeah, it's handled." Around them, the tension hadn't gone away, but something had shifted. Not in the air, but in them. They weren't just two kids anymore. They were the children of a man who didn't just buy first-class seats. He built the systems people like Janice Whitmore believed they owned. And now that system was about to feel the full weight of accountability. 20 minutes later, just as the murmurs in the first-class cabin began to settle into a tense hush, the plane door reopened with an abrupt hiss that caught everyone's attention. 3 sharply dressed men in dark suits stepped onto the aircraft, each wearing executive identification badges from Stratosphere Airlines. Without greeting, without fanfare, they moved with purpose toward the front. The tallest among them, a silver-haired man with a steel stare and an embossed leather folder under his arm, introduced himself quietly to the lead flight attendant. "Richard Tolles, VP of Passenger Relations. We're here under direct instruction from CEO Preston Holloway." Behind him stood Marcus Lynn, Head of Legal Affairs, and Ethan Green, Director of Crisis Response. The cabin crew froze. The air shifted. Every passenger was watching. Richard opened the folder, pulled out a manifest, and spoke firmly. "Seats 2A and 2B, legally booked under Derrick Anderson 2 weeks ago, paid in full. System confirms it. Passenger IDs match. No errors, no reallocations." This was not a mistake. This was a failure of judgment. Cheryl, the lead flight attendant, tried to explain, voice shaky. "We were just trying to avoid confrontation." Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. And instead, you created one. He turned to Ethan, who handed over a sealed letter. Effective immediately, Cheryl Morris and 3 associated crew members are suspended pending investigation. You'll be deplaned and escorted by security after passenger reboarding is complete. Audible gasps rippled across the cabin. Meanwhile, Marcus had stepped over to Janice Whitmore, who now sat stiffly with her arms crossed and lips tight, no longer shouting but boiling with silent rage. "Ms. Whitmore," he said calmly, "as of this moment, your Platinum Elite status is revoked, permanently. You are no longer a preferred customer with Stratosphere Airlines." Janice's face drained of color. "You can't do that. I've spent hundreds of thousands with this airline." "And this airline," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "does not tolerate status being used to dehumanize paying passengers. You will be removed from this flight immediately." As she stood, furious and trembling, a phone dinged in the row behind her. Then another. And another. Malik glanced sideways and noticed a passenger scrolling frantically. Layla whispered, "Is that us?" It was. The live stream from earlier had just exploded. The video, now posted to Twitter and Instagram by the man in row 3, captured the moment Janice had said, "Kids like you don't belong here." The clip, with the caption, "Racism in First Class," Stratosphere Airlines fails two black teens had hit trending status in under 15 minutes. Thousands of comments poured in. This is what happens every day. Their dad better sue the hell out of that airline. Protect black kids. Period. Richard glanced at his phone as a notification flashed. Stratosphere boycott was now trending number 4 nationwide. Without missing a beat, he turned to Ethan and whispered something. Within minutes, Stratosphere's CEO Preston Holloway appeared live at a press podium in New York, issuing a public apology streamed across news networks and social media. What happened today on Flight 782 does not reflect our values. We have failed, and we are implementing immediate reforms. He announced a system-wide overhaul in passenger rights training, implicit bias education for all flight staff, and the launch of an independent passenger advocacy board. The plane still hadn't moved an inch, but the ground beneath the airline had shifted. In the silence that followed, as Janice was quietly walked down the aisle by 2 uniformed airport officers, her gaze briefly caught Malik's. He didn't flinch, he didn't gloat, he just watched. Calm, centered, unmovable. Layla placed a hand on his, and for the first time since boarding, he let out a small, steady breath. Justice had boarded the plane, and it wasn't leaving. Malik and Layla sat quietly in seats 2A and 2B, the very seats they had been asked to surrender, now reclaimed not through shouting or confrontation, but through dignity, calm resistance, and a cool home. The cabin felt different now, lighter, quieter, not because the drama had vanished, but because something more powerful had taken its place. Clarity. Around them, the murmurs returned, no longer filled with judgment or curiosity, but soft affirmations. An older man across the aisle leaned in slightly, tipping his head toward Malik. "You did the right thing, young man. You stood your ground." A middle-aged woman in 1C whispered to Layla with a smile, "Thank you for not backing down." It mattered. Neither sibling responded with words, they didn't need to. There was a stillness in them, a maturity that didn't crave attention but simply radiated presence. The plane began to taxi slowly, the engines humming low beneath the floor, and outside the window, the last of the late afternoon light shimmered across the tarmac. Layla leaned back, gazing at the sky as it shifted from blue to soft pink. Malik folded his hands in his lap, his eyes steady and forward. They didn't gloat, didn't cheer. But inside them and throughout the cabin, something had changed. People had watched what integrity looked like when it wasn't loud. They had witnessed how power, when not abused, could protect. And most of all, they had seen 2 teenagers teach a room full of adults what it means to hold on to truth in the face of pressure. The lesson wasn't just for the airline or the executives or the woman who was escorted off. It was for everyone who chose silence instead of action, comfort over courage. Because dignity isn't given, it's claimed and protected. The deeper lesson from this flight is not about seats, status, or even airline policies. It's about the uncomfortable truth that privilege, when left unchecked, attempts to redefine what fairness looks like. Malik and Layla's story reminds us that power is not in the volume of one's voice or the shine of a membership card, but in the unwavering decision to say, "I belong here. I earned this, and I will not be erased." Their strength didn't come from confrontation, but from their calm refusal to compromise what was rightfully theirs. They didn't need to match hostility with hostility. They matched it with clarity, conviction, and an unshakable understanding of their worth. In a society that still too often asks young black kids to shrink, to wait, to defer, they did none of that. They stood up, not by rising from their seats, but by staying in them. That is the quiet revolution. That is how change begins, when those who are told to move simply don't. And when people watching, the silent witnesses in seats 1C, 3D, 4A, choose to remember that moment not as someone else's story, but as a test of their own conscience. The truth is, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits calmly, hands folded, eyes clear, waiting for the world to catch up. And when it does, it leaves behind not just consequences for the guilty, but a blueprint for everyone else. Stand firm, speak when it matters, and never let status outweigh what's right. Because the moment you do, you stop protecting the future we all claim to believe in. So now the question turns to you. If you had been in that first-class cabin, watching, sitting, sipping a glass of wine, or scrolling your phone, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up or looked away? Would you have stood with truth, even when it was uncomfortable? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice, yes, yours, might be the one that gives someone else the courage to stand firm when it matters most. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this one. Because sometimes justice boards quietly, but it always arrives. Thank you for joining us on today's powerful journey. Stories like Malik and Layla's aren't just about a moment on a plane, they're about what happens when dignity meets resistance and truth refuses to back down. At X Daily Stories, we believe that every voice matters, especially those that challenge the status quo and speak up when silence is easier. Whether it's uncovering injustice, celebrating quiet courage, or reminding us what integrity looks like, we're here to bring you stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. If this story moved you, made you think, or sparked a conversation in your heart, don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a growing community that values truth, fairness, and storytelling with impact. New episodes drop every week. Real voices, real lessons, real change. Subscribe now to X Daily Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment where justice speaks, even in the quietest seats. Because one story can change a mind, and one voice, like yours, can help change the world. See you in the next story.